Hey there, everyone. Thanks for going back and checking out my content. Today, we're going to be working in the database again. Surprise, surprise. We're not really going to, I'm probably going to build out a simple thing here. But just to cut to the chase, what we're going to be doing is some abilities. We have damage types. Let's do some abilities. Which actually, this kind of ties into it because I wanted to create an emote system. And I mean, abilities, they are just basically just a damage system with some emotes. So I think that's what we're going to do. So the plan is simple here. We're going to create two more folders here. One's going to be a montage database, and another one's going to be the ability database. We'll go through. I'll set up two folders, one with the structure for the montage data that we'll need, and then along with the primary data asset, the interface, and then the data asset. And then we'll do the same thing for the abilities. And I'll show you how I did it. And I'll show you how I set it up, and then we can move on and probably do the component, I think. It'll be next, which if we have the database, you can already kind of guess how the component's going to work based on how we've been doing it in the past. But let's get these folders created and move on to the component. And with the power of time skip, boom. Now I said we were gonna probably create two folders. I ended up creating three. And that's mostly because I wanted icons to be their own thing as well. So I created icons, I created an icon folder, I created a montage folder, and I created the ability folder. So they all three of these follow the same structure. So we've got the structure, the interface, the primary data asset, and the data asset to go along with it. The interface, of course, on this has the as and the get. So our regular just getter IDs. And that's for all of them. So the montages have that and the abilities have that. That's all that they have right now. Now in the structure here is just a simple, more of a wrapper structure. So if we want to add anything to these later down the line, we can. So this icon, it's a texture 2D with some tags, icon tags and tags for if we ever want to query in the PDA and write a new interface function that does these searches. So if we want to get like a set of icons, for example, that share a similar tag, we can do so. And that's what the tag's mostly for here. And so let's see, into the montage, same thing. We've got the DA, the montage data. And in the montage data, it's very similar. We have a montage tags with the tags field as well. And then over in the abilities here, same format that we're working in. And the structure is a little bit larger here. So I thought of a few properties that we might need in some abilities here. So something like a display name, a description. Here's an icon ID. So this icon ID is going to link to that icon database, and that's mostly why I grabbed it. I was like, you know, abilities just don't use icons. Items tend to use icons as well. So that's why it was like thinking like, oh man, probably need a third table here. And then we have and then moving on, we have the ability class that we're going to spawn in. So this is going to be, these abilities are basically going to function similar to how projectiles work, but instead of spawning a projectile, something with a projectile movement, we're going to spawn in just a static actor, basically, and then do something off that actor. So some other additional properties we have here is like the range, we'll have what the warm-up time, the active time, cooldown time for the ability. We've got a little marker here is AoE. Not sure if we'll use this. And then we've got a array of strings, which is going to be the prerequisite ability IDs. So any abilities that are prerequisites, we can easily link right here. I added a socket spawn name, a spawn socket. I think we'll need a socket. I'm not entirely sure, but we've got it. And then we've got a montage ID, which links to that montage thing that I just showed. We've got a damage type ID because if you recall, or maybe if you don't, in our damage system, we have our damage system just does a simple subtraction right now. So if we ever wanted to create a heal, we just pass in a negative value for when we create our damage type and our damages to go along with it. The damages technically damage. Negative damage is technically healing, so like that's what our current system is right now. Then we've got an effect ID. If we ever want to do like a sort of an effect ID, we might want to add multiple here for like something like casting effects, then the active effects, and then the ending effects basically. We might want to add more of these, right? But we'll have the structure here to play around with. So I think I'll just stick with one for now. And then we have specific gameplay tags if we want to pass in any sort of gameplay tags. If we want to apply any tags, for example. We're not really working with, I don't think we'll really work with tags here, because I think the tags are mostly going to be used in a when you apply the stat changes to the opponent, right? Because how we have we can probably make the system where it's a full system that can automatically derive stats from a set of database, basically a set of database that is associated with it, and then it just simply applies that debuff basically through these tags. But we don't have that database set up yet, and I don't think we're gonna do the effects so much as just a regular like ability, because basically emotes are abilities as well. I mean, I guess if you want to think of it as well. And then yeah, we have the finalize the tags here, and then we have the ability tags, and then of course we have the same structure to go along with it. So let me put together some data here. I might need to go grab an animation package off the marketplace or whatever I've got, just to test out some abilities. But let me put together some data and let's put together a component and let's see how this actually works together. Okay, a slight change of plan here. We first need to make the ability that we're actually spawning in, right? The actual actor that we're going to spawn in off of our data. So in our ability data, we can set this ability to that class and spawn it in. So the ability is going to work very similar to how the projectiles work and stuff like that. It's just going to be a slightly different format. And right here, I'm going to create an ability base. And then off of this, we can create like an AoE damage, a projectile spawn, or whatever. While we can use this base to just spawn something. So we've got the actor here, and we've got the interface to go along with it. The interface here is very similar to how we did the projectile and how we did like the damage, where you have this, where we have the as, and then where we have the initialize, where we take in the data, right? And then in that, we implement that. All right, we add that to the actor, and then we implement it. There. And then, but with this, we need a handful of things, because right, with these abilities, right, we need a handful of properties that we need, right? A handful of properties from the databases. So over on the variable side here, we've got the ability data we're passing in, right? Cache the ability data. We cache the damage data that we want to do. And then we also have the references to our databases that we're using. So here we're using the damage types and we're using the effects database. And so through this ability data, we can go through, we can get the damage type by ID. So that our structure, we have the damage class. Whenever we want to deal damage, we'll have it here. We'll have the damage class. And then we set the effect. Pretty simple stuff. Now what's next here is I think this will be pretty much good to go, but what we'll need to do is when we spawn this, we'll need probably another interface call that basically says because we'll have the initialize. I mean, we could do it off of the initialize and then just have it at the end here where we want to trigger the ability basically. But right, so this is what we're going to do for the ability. And now we need to spawn this in cause the, and then when we spawn this in, we can cause the damage and stuff like that. So we just need a component now that keeps track of and triggers our abilities based on the abilities that we have, the prerequisites, and things like that. So let's see. Let's move on to that. Also, while I was trying to think through these this ability, oh, I did move it to this actors folder actually because it is technically an actor. Let's see. Down in the abilities, I did add a few new ones here. So I added an energy cost. So whatever the cost for the ability is going to be. We don't know the type or whatever stat you'd be paying with it. And I believe that's going to need another table for a few. We'll need to build out that stat system. But for now, for testing, I think energy cost will be okay. I added a projectile ID here in case we want to spawn any sort of projectile off this ability. We can simply set it here. Yeah. So let's move on to the component that's going to handle. Right now, I think we're finally ready for the component. Yeah. So let's go into the component. Let's go. Let's make an actor component. Yeah. So I guess the plan, yeah, will be to create an actor component that spawns this ability based on whatever key we press for now. I guess that should be fine. All right, let's hop to it. So, now we're in the second half of this video, and we're gonna go over how to do a simple ability system that you can implement very easily. So, just to recap, we have for this system, we have a montage and an ability folder here. Now the icon, like I mentioned earlier, this is optional. This is more of a third. It was more of a third thing. But anyways, we have montage. So this montage data asset, right, holds the montages we want to play. Okay. So these are the montages we want to play for the ability. Now I grabbed the close quarters anim set. You can use whatever animations you have. That's besides the point. But anyways, so you plug in a montage here, and the montage is a bit special. Okay. So here, what you do is you take your animation, right? You take your animation here, and then you if you have to, you can retarget it to whatever skeleton you're doing, right? You should be familiar with retargeting assets. So I retargeted it from the close quarter anim set, and I retargeted it to the mannequin that I'm using. And then with that, you create the anim montage off of that, right? And then that creates this here. Okay. So this is a simple like punch, right? Now you'll notice something here. In here, I left click and added a notify, new notify here. And I added a trigger ability notify. Okay. So at this notify, it's going to go into our animation blueprint and trigger a custom function. Okay. So in our animation blueprint, we can actually, I'm going to have to go and just take a look here. We can find it. We go into the mesh and then we pop open this animation class, right? We open up the animation class. This is the one that I have set for default. That's fine. So when you add that trigger, this will pop up, right? Or you go into here and then you can, this anim notify will pop up if you do anim notify, and then it's usually just like a custom event here that'll pop up. So you can see here our trigger ability. And what I do off of this is I get our owner, just like we do down here, and I send it to an interface call of this ability user. We've got a new interface, by the way. So what this is going to do is going to go to this interface, call the interface on the character. Okay. So this interface here, if we go into, it's under components, I put it. So in our ability system, right, we have the ability user here. So this is ability user. It has an as. It has a use ability by notify. I couldn't really come up with a good name for this, so I kept it like this, just to denote that this is the ability that we're using here. And that's it. It doesn't have any parameters. And then there's a get ability user skeletal mesh. This is for the montages. So what we do is we simply pass in the skeletal mesh when we implement this method. So in our character, I think I closed it, but that's okay. And when we implement this on the ability user here, let's see, as the self, and then the notify. So this is going to use, when you notify this, we're going to use this ability component and we're going to cast the ability, basically. Now it's a little special here, but basically all you need to know is when we trigger that anim notify, it's going to come here. And I'll explain in the ability component what this cast ability does. Okay. And then the ability user and then the skeletal mesh here is just going to return the skeletal mesh. Easy enough. Okay, so once we got that triggered, so that'll trigger this whenever we play this montage and we get to this trigger ability, right? So this, we can apply this tag to any of these montages. So whenever we want to trigger the ability that we're using, we just simply add this tag to whatever montage. And these tags are tied to skeletons. So as long as you create it here, we can see into the skeleton. We can actually see over here. I don't know if you got it, but the trigger ability will pop up right here. Now, speaking in the skeletons as well, the ability system is going to be spawning the abilities by a socket, okay? So when we cast our ability and we're running the montage, we want to track what socket we attach it to. So in this case, I have a Knuckles left socket for today's example. As you saw, we have the left jab, so we have a left socket. So basically, we'll shoot fireballs out of our Knuckles. Basically, that's what we're going to be doing. Yeah, we got a socket that we can cast our ability from here. Now, just to recap some of the things that we have here in our data, right? We'll go back to the data. We've got our abilities. We've had our montages, right? We went through the montage. We went everything over right up into the skeleton. Now we're into the abilities here. So in the abilities, I set up a single ability here, and this ability is just called Flame Punch. Okay, it's just Flame Punch, and so the display name is Flame Punch. The description is a Flame Punch. There's no icon associated with it because I haven't set that up yet. And then we add this ability class, this ability base class. Okay, and then we have a bunch of other things here we can set up. Now, I don't have all of this energy range set up. The warm up time was easy. The active time and the cooldown time, I don't know about these yet, so I'll see in the future, but we can play around more with those. We've got prerequisite ability IDs, so if we have any prerequisites we need to unlock before we cast this ability, we can simply add these here. We've got the socket name, so the socket that we've got. So this is going to spawn the ability at this socket. Okay. We don't have a projectile ID. We're not firing projectiles. We have the montage ID that's linked to this montage over in the other data asset. The damage type ID isn't here because we're not actually dealing any damage yet. And I'll show you where you'd be able to do that. It's very easy in the ability component. And then we have a simple effect that goes along with this ability. Now, like I said, we can have different effects for different stages of our ability, but for right now, I think I'm just going to have one effect that gets spawned at a socket, and then we play this montage, okay? So once we have all that set up, right, now we need the actual component. Now the component over here is in an ability folder, right? So we've got an interface for the component, and we've got the ability component itself. We've also got the ability user component that we attach to things to use the abilities, right? So in the ability component here, we've got a handful of functions. And in here, We've got the as ability component. We have a use ability by ID. We have has ability, which is exactly what you think it does. We have unlock ability, which has a few parameters here. Takes in the ID, of course. And then we have the cast. Now, the difference between the use ability by ID and the cast ability is the use ability by ID is what we're actually going to use to trigger the abilities. Because when we want to cast an ability, we want to cast it by the ID. But this cast ability is for when we want to use the anim notify trigger. And this is when we actually cast when we trigger the actual like damage of the ability. That's basically what this is. I mean, I guess you could say this is trigger damage if you wanted to. And then it would be just use. I mean, then you can say this is cast by ID. So either one. But yeah, so those are the couple of methods that we have here, right? So then what we do is we create our component, okay? And we set up the interface, and we set up a few variables. So like usual, we have to grab some stuff from the database here. So we'll start at the top here actually. So in the base here, we've got the available ability IDs. So these are a list of IDs that are currently available for you to cast. Then we have a gameplay tag container. This is going to control the state of which our component is in. So let's say we're casting an ability, we would be put into the state of casting. If we are ready to cast an ability, we can add tags for ready, which is actually kind of what I did here. I set up a new data table for these tags. So we have ready and we have casting. And so we have the tag. I have set it to default to be ready, but we could change that later. That should be fine. And then okay, we have the databases here. So the database points to the ability database, and then the montage points to the montage. And of course, you'll probably want to add these if you spawn the projectile, because, or you may not need to put it here. You can probably put it right in the ability itself, because that's where you'll be spawning if you need to spawn anything ability wise. Then we have the cache stuff. So we have the current ability cached. We have the montage data cached. We also have the ability user here. So the owner gets interface called to the ability user. So the current ability user that we have that interface on, we simply save it. And then we have the ability actor reference, which is the actor after we spawn it. So we can trigger it effectively. We can trigger the damage. So we can get rid of this event tick. So going over here into the interface, we'll go down, we'll have the cast ability. So this is the cast ability when we get back to the character. If I can find it. All right. When we trigger that notify, we trigger this cast ability, right? And this cast ability is going to take our actor reference and trigger our ability. And now the actor will, so it'll trigger our ability, which means do the damage basically. Because if we take a look, I'll close up some of these. I'm sure you're following along pretty well. So if we go up to the ability actor, right, up here in the ability actor, we have as an ability actor. So remember, this is the actor this is the actor class that's getting tied to in those data assets. So we've got we've got the initialize, which is going to take in the current ability user and then the ability data. Okay, and then it's going to come into the trigger, and then we have the trigger ability here. Now in this ability actor, what we have is on this event tick, we'll start here on the event tick, right? We just go through, we check, we set up a handful of things here, similar to how we did it before. So this damage or this ability base is going to cache ability data, the damage type data, and then the ability user reference. And then we need the type database and the effect database here for what we're doing. Okay, easy stuff. So when on the event tick here, so on the event tick, we'll go through this ability actor reference. We'll get the user's skeletal mesh, and then we'll find the socket and we'll set the world location. Okay. I also created a few helper functions here for us. In the utils folder, I created a ability utils to go along with it. Now, these are just pretty simple stuff. The these gets are just basically a ways to trim down this data that we're passing in. We're passing in the ability data for various. So if I get the ability spawn data, we get the ability class and the ability spawn socket name. When we want to get the ability costs, we can just, so these are just basically filters, just to save us some time and we don't have to have these big blocky structures all over the place. So we have the montage, and then we have a prerequisite one here. And the prerequisite takes in the current ability ID list, so the current abilities that we have available to us, along with the current ID that we want to try and add, along with the database. So basically it goes through, grabs the ID that we want to try and add from the database, grabs the prerequisite ability IDs, loops through each of them, and then if the ability exists in this list, it'll keep going, and if it does not exist, then we set this local variable satisfied flag to false, and we just simply break and return false. So if any of these prerequisite IDs do not exist in our current list, the prerequisites are not satisfied, and then we return false. So that's what that is. Now, going down, we're still in the, okay, we're back in the ability component here, and when we want to unlock that ability, here, so when we unlock the ability, we check has ID, right? So we want to check this has ID, which has ID here is actually the interface call for this, because we will actually want to make it so that we can check if you have an ability outside the component. So this is just this just checks the contains. That's all this does. Back in the unlock here, so we check that, we branch. If it's already unlocked, then we just say true, it's unlocked. Otherwise, we go down here, we run our prerequisites satisfied with our database and our array, and then our new ability we're trying to add. If our prerequisites are satisfied, if our prerequisites are satisfied, we add it to our ID list, and we simply return unlocked. Otherwise, our prerequisites are unsatisfied, so therefore we say that we cannot unlock it. Now we did that. Now we go down to use ability of ID. So this is the thing that we're actually going to be calling, right, in our actor component. So when we call this, we're passing in an ability ID we want to activate. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check, okay, do you have that ability? Right. Okay. And then we're going to check to see, do you have the gameplay tag of status ready? Yes. Okay, you do. If you have the status of ready, then get that ID, and then we save it. And then we run the utility command to grab that montage, and then we go to the database to grab that montage data, and then we save that. We pass this current ability ID through, and we get the modified costs, or we get the costs here, right? And then we set up the new gameplay tag. So basically we want to remove the ready tag and add the casting tag. Now you're casting. And this warm-up time, now we're not using the costs or the range or the active time or any of this stuff so far yet. That might be for future, because I want to kind of try and do something with custom stats. So this stuff might actually change in the future. That's why I didn't actually implement it yet. But anyways, we can take the warm-up time. We can add that to a timer by event, not looping, because we just want to trigger it once. Then what we do is we trigger the ability, right? Okay. And then we grab the current ability that we've saved. We get we run the filter for the ability class and the socket name. Now what we do is off the get owner, we say, is it ability user? So does it have our interface? If it does, grab this skeletal mesh. Okay? And then from that skeletal mesh, grab the socket location. Then simply just spawn the actor at that location. So whatever our ability actor is, we will spawn it at that location. Now we take that return value and we say, okay, isn't it ability actor? It is. If it is, we'll set this reference and then we'll go and we'll initialize it. Now when we initialize it, we'll pass in the current data and the ability user. That's what we saw here in the initialize. All right, we initialize it, we set the data, and then we'll query the various databases for things and then set up the effects just like we did for the projectile. Yep, off this ability data, we can simply go to the damage. Here, we of course will need to set all these databases by default, be able to use them. And so yeah, you just go through, check the effect. Yeah, so you check the damage type. So now we have the damage type, and then we have the effect ID. And then we have the effect, and we can apply the effect as well. Now, off the other third event here is the trigger ability. Now, this is where you'll probably do like a sphere trace on the ability to trigger your damage. Right now, I just have a simple destroy, but off of here is where you'd apply your damage in however fashion you'd like. So whether that be throwing a fireball, doing a sphere trace, or something like that, that's where you do it here. Okay, and then, okay, back in the ability component, we're back at the initialize. And then what we do from there is when we save the ability user, right, we have the ability user here. The ability user, we're going to grab that skeletal mesh here, and we're going to pass it into the montage. And we've got the montage data that we saved here. So we'll just play the montage as as it is, right? So this just goes through, spawns the actor, initializes the ability actor, and then plays a montage. That's basically the high level overview of what it's doing. Now, during that montage, we know that there is a notify. But when it notifies, it goes to the animation, notifies the animation, and then here it'll trigger the ability. That'll go to the animation, right? And then that will trigger that ability. And from that, where is it? From that event notify, we'll say cast the ability. And then from that cast ability here, we'll go, where did I put it? Here. Ah, here it is. We'll cast the ability. And so what we'll do is we'll take the actor reference that we have saved, trigger that ability, and then swap the gameplay tags effectively. That's what we'll do here. So then on the trigger ability, we just destroy the actor like I had before. So that's where this does. So that is the high level overview of the component. Now, if we see it in action, we can just simply see it in action. We have a flame, so we have a flame punch that we spawn an actor that is going to do the effect of a fire effect at our socket location, because that's what it does. So if we see this in action, you can see if I hit. Well, actually, before we do that, I did set it up to be a 1 key to use the ability by the ID, Flame Punch. And I did set up the ID here in the available IDs. So here you go. Now if we hit play, just to show you that, what I did. If I hit 1, boom, we've got a Flame Punch. Now, I didn't set anything to stop the montage from playing or to stop our inputs when we're playing, but I think that's fine because I just want the ability system to be able to simply just play a montage and then like some sort of effect to go with it. So yeah, if you got all that, I hope I hope that you found that useful, and maybe this gives you an idea of how you can do abilities, or maybe maybe yeah, maybe you just got some ideas how to do it yourself. That's kind of the goal here. All right, well, I'm out. Thanks for watching today, guys.